Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So in this part, we would be talking about information systems, organizations, and strategy, and especially how those three concepts would be interacting with each other, would be connected to each other. First of all, we need to know the features that an organization has, because information technology and organizations influence one another. So the organization, the structure and so on, would influence how the information technology is designed. But on the other hand, the use of an information system might need the organization to change, because they might need to change themselves to be able to use the information system. Now, here are some parts of the organization that would be influenced, that would be changed, or the other way around. The information system would be changed because of these items. First, the structure. So the information system, when you design it, you would need to know what the structure is like. Do we have a board of directors? And who are the top level managers? The CEO, the chief finance officer, and then the chief marketing officer, just that? Or do you have a knowledge information officer? Do you have other high level officials at the company? And what about the structure itself? How many hierarchies does it have? Is it a flat organization, or is it a high bureaucracy organization? Who does the decision making? Things like that. And then the business process, you need to know also, how do you do things in the company? What's the strategic, what's the standard operating procedures in the company? Now, on one hand, the information system would be made based on those considerations. But on the other hand, if the company were to buy an information system, they might need to change the structure of the company, especially the lower end of the structure. Or they might need to change the business process that the company has. Also, you need to take into account the politics, not meaning national politics, but this is about the people that have interest in the company, the groups of people that are in the company. Also, the culture that the company has. Is it an innovative culture, or is it a top-down culture, and so on? What about the environment? What are outside of the company? What types of decisions do management make, and how are those decisions made? And here you can see the environment would also be affecting the company. So the company gets input from the environment, and then the organization might change based on the environment. And then the output of the company would also be later on affecting the environment. So it's a never-ending process of change. More features of the organizations. For instance, how is the hierarchy of the company? What about the authority that the managers have in terms of decision making? How much are they accountable for the decisions they make? Is the company focused on efficiency, or is it more focused on survivability? Is it more focused on customers that are high-end and they don't really think about the price? It's not price sensitive, for instance. It might be different for each company. Also, the routines and the business processes that the company has, as well as culture, politics, environments, and structures. Why are organizational politics important? Because if there are lots of groups that influence the company and influence its members, then you have to make sure that those groups are in favor of the implementation of an information system, that the one that you're making. Because these influencers, if their interest is bothered somehow, they might create resistance. They might influence other people not to use the information system because it would be against their interest. Maybe there are managers that have authority right now, but later on with the information system, they would not have the same level of authority. Or maybe there would be whole levels of management that would be banished, that would disappear because of the information system, because of the efficiency that the information system gives. Culture. Now, is there a culture of change in the company, or is the company more rigid? People there do not want to change. People there do not think about changes in the environment as long as they're comfortable working there. So that's also one thing you need to consider. And it could be a unifying force. If the culture is geared towards change, geared towards automation, then it would be enabling the implementation of the information system. But if, however, it is against the change, then it might be an inhibitor. It might pose a challenge, a problem to the implementation of the information system. Also, its environment. So you have seen in the diagram before that the organization and the environment would be influencing each other. Whether it's a good influence or a bad influence, it depends on how the managers, how the organization manages the influences. And also, there are disruptive technologies that affect an organization. So because of the use of technology, either it's the internet, the use of the internet, it might be the use of mobile gadgets and so on. There are many changes happening to businesses, industries, and the market. And because of disruptive technologies, there are always first movers and fast followers. The first movers would be the inventors of the technology. For instance, let's say Grab or Gojek, for instance. Now they are one of the first, or Amazon, one of the first companies that use new technology, and it changes the landscape. It changes how people buy things, how people order transportation. They're the first movers. But then we might become fast followers if we have the capacity, if the company has the capacity, enough resources to follow the example of those first movers. If a disruptive technology happens and the market adopts that new technology and the companies, the followers are not able to implement, to use the same new technology as well, they might lose against the competition that do use those new technologies. So those followers need to work fast in order to adopt the new technology. Now, we were talking about structure as well. You can see here there are 5 types of organizational structures. First, entrepreneurial. These companies are very flexible. These companies still are able to take risks. They're still out of their comfort zone, easily changing, usually the small startup companies. And then there's a middle-sized firm that's starting to become a bureaucracy. These companies would need more energy to change, to introduce a new information system in. And it would be even harder to make changes in divisionalized bureaucracy companies, those large companies that are in the Fortune 500 companies, for instance, the large companies, the conglomerates. This would even need more attention if you implement an information system. You have professional bureaucracies. This is kind of like more flexible because the structure is not too heavy. You don't have much bureaucracy there, like in law firms, in schools, universities, hospitals. And you have advocacy, those are consulting firms, which is quite flat. Now here, the transaction cost theory shows that the main reasoning for a company is to be working more economically. So they would try to lower transaction costs. And then how do they do it? They might be doing it through vertical integration, meaning they would be making businesses that are previously done by suppliers, for instance. Let's say a car company. A car company would buy their supplies for the metal plates from another company, from the suppliers. But then the company decides to make their own sheets of metal. And then because it's very profitable, they can also sell the sheets of metal to other companies. They decide to also make their own furnace to change ore metal into sheet metal, and so on. So that's vertical integration upwards. Downwards, the company, the automotive company, might decide to open their own distributors, their own service stations. So that's vertical integration. It would be trying to go upwards as well as downwards. And of course, that would be making the company more efficient. The company would be getting more profit. And also, the use of IT would lower costs for the company. Market transactions in terms of how you transact with the suppliers, because you have constant communication with the suppliers, and then you can give a more fixed, definite, and a more frequent order, or maybe even automatic ordering system to the suppliers. Then you can get a better deal. Also to the distributors. So it would be lowering the cost of transaction. Because it's automatic, you don't have to pay the transaction cost much. It would very much lower the transaction cost. And we have agency theory. Agency theory is the cost that you need to pay a middleman, another party, for the purpose of getting services. Now, for instance, in terms of, let's say, cleaning service, before you might need to hire an agent to manage the cleaning services for your company. But of course, you would need to pay and give some profit to that agency. Using information technology, you can manage your own cleaning workers, and then you would be more easily able to supervise the works of those cleaning people. And you can make it even more cost efficient than you would if you were to use a third party for those services. Of course, that's a very simple example. It might be services in the mining industry where you hire companies like Swambazi to manage the electrical part of drilling for oil, for instance. And you might want to do it on your own. Now here we can see that IT would have different and many impacts on the organization, as well as how organizations behave. For instance, here, IT flattens the organization, meaning that if you look here, if you have this kind of organization, you can see the organization has several levels of bureaucracy, several levels of management, because it's a large organization, let's say with tens of thousands of workers. You can't manage all those workers if you don't have a bureaucratic structure like this, if you did not use information technology. Because there's what we call span of control. Span of control is how many workers a manager could handle. Without IT, you might only be able to manage, let's say, 6 workers. So one manager would be supervising 6 people or maybe 10 people. But more than that, it would be quite difficult because you wouldn't be able to track what they're doing. You might not be able to monitor them. But then, for instance, if you were to use information systems, then those same managers using information systems would be able to manage maybe 30 people, maybe even more. So in that case, you do not need that many managers to manage the same 10,000 people, for instance. So the organization would be flattened. So what are the benefits of a flat organization? So you can imagine this type of company would be like an elephant. Elephants would move slowly. They would not easily change the direction of their course. For instance, like IBM in the old days, they became a very large and bureaucratic company, and then other companies started to eat their pie. Other companies started to open the same businesses as they are in, and because they're more agile, while IBM, this type of company on the top, is more like an elephant. These companies, the flat companies, are more like deers. They are able, or maybe even like tigers. They're more agile, easily move from one direction to another, and eventually the elephants would lose against the tigers. What happens here? You can see that because there are not many levels of management, then the process of decision making becomes more simple. And then if there are ideas from the bottom level, because most of the ideas would come from the low-level employees, for instance, these ideas could go up easily through the chain of command. Or if there are changes that the top managers want to do, these changes would more easily be affecting the lower level managers and all the other workers. While here, if there's an idea, a creative idea from the low level managers here, it would need more time to go through the chain of command. So this company becomes not innovative and not able to change quickly. Now here we see that in the organization, there would always be resistance to change because people don't like to change. People who use the manual system or people who use an old information system, they're used to using that system. It needs hard work to study the new system, to start changing, to use new business processes, for instance. It needs work to do, and it needs adjustment. And people tend to not change. So that's why there's always resistance to change. Now, you have to change together the structure of the organization, also culture, politics, and how the organization works, because those would be affected by the information system. Now, here you can see like what Porter mentioned, is about the competitive forces model. The competitive forces model, there are 5 forces that would be affecting the company and affecting the strategies of the company. The company, of course, is affected by its competitors. Who are they competing against? Let's say this is a taxi company. The taxi company, of course, would be competing against other taxi companies. But now we see that there are companies that offer similar services like GoCar, for instance, or GrabCar, the new market entrants. the company also has to compete against this. And because they have a new business model, they are more intimate with their customers, the firm might lose the competition against this. So the company needs to change as well. Also, there's another force that would be affecting that company, substitute products. In this case, it might be the motorcycle companies, the companies that offer motorcycle transportation services, what we call the ojek. Okay, this is a substitute, not exactly the same, but giving the same type of service. You would also need to be aware of the power, the bargaining power of suppliers. If, for instance, the supplier is the only company that provides that type of product that you need, the spare parts that you need for the taxi company, the supplier would have a large bargaining power. But if there are other alternative suppliers, then the bargaining power is lower. If you have lots of customers, then the bargaining power of the customers are low. If you have not many customers, then the bargaining power of the customers are quite high. Here's an explanation of those different parties that we have just mentioned. Now, from those competitive forces, the company would be able to figure out which strategy they would need to use in order to compete. It might be the low-cost strategy, meaning they would be offering lower cost than the competitors. Now the company needs to think about how would they use information systems to lower the cost of production, or maybe increase the sales and lower the profit margin. How do you use IT for that to make it more efficient? And then product differentiation, giving a different product than the competitors. For the taxi company, it might be, for instance, having a better connection with the companies. For some companies, some taxi companies are using applications as well. Or maybe if it's more simple, it might be giving a cooler which is filled with drinks, with cold drinks in the taxi, which would give a different value, a higher value to the customers. In that case, how do information systems support the application which enables customers to directly order the taxi? And then focusing on niche markets, small markets, but specialized markets. How do you reach them using information systems? Also, how do you strengthen your relationship with customers and suppliers by using information systems? So these are the main 4 types of strategies. And how do you use information systems and information technology to support those strategies? And here's an example of all those 4 strategies. Now we would be in this slide talking about how internet impacts competitive advantage. So here, the internet would be transforming several industries because they would be offering new business models. Travel agencies, you don't go to the travel agency anymore, but you would be ordering the airplanes, ordering bus tickets on the internet, booking hotels on the internet, not through a physical travel agent, but through an online virtual travel agent. What about the influence on the media? Do you still buy newspapers, or do you buy and read your news online? Now, the competitive forces that we just mentioned are still there, but the competition is becoming more fierce because people are trying to get leverage using information systems. and there would be universal standards that are used. In that case, any company could be using a website. Any company could be making their e-commerce systems. Here is the value chain model, and it shows how well the internet and the use of IT and information systems to support the value chain of a company. This is the value chain. You can see the suppliers of the suppliers giving materials to the suppliers, giving materials to the company. And then it would be sending to the distributors and to the customers. So in each part, there would be an added value given to the goods that are being produced in this value chain. In the company itself, there would be primary activities and supporting activities. The primary activities, for instance, are inbound logistics, and it could be supported by the automated warehousing system. Operations supported by computer-controlled machining systems, and so on. You can see it here. On the bottom here, you can see in order to connect the company with the suppliers, you can use, for instance, a supply chain management system or a procurement system. In order to connect yourselves with the customers, whether it's distributors, retailers, customers directly, you can use customer relationship management systems. And then you can use also supporting activities, including information systems for administration and management, information systems for human resources, and so on. And all these would have the objective of increasing the company's value chain. Now, here is the concept of value web, because you would have different companies, independent companies using IT to collaborate their value chains. You would then have something like this. If you can see in the other slide, this is a connection of different companies, but in one industry. Here you can see these different companies would be aligning with one another. Suppliers would have their own ecosystem. They would be connecting with the strategic alliances and so on. And then here, this is an extension of that concept. You have the industry, one industry, let's say Honda, they have their suppliers, they have their customers, their distributors. This is Toyota, this is Suzuki, and so on. They would be having their own value chain here. And this value chain of these companies would be competing against, once again, new market entrants, substitute products, customers, and suppliers. So it becomes a larger ecosystem because of the use of information systems. Okay, so please think again that these three things are connected: information systems, organizations, and strategy. Thank you, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.